Good evening and welcome to our talk this evening, where it's my great pleasure to welcome Ted Capstick Esoteric Astrologer, who's going to share his insights on the Libra Full Moon in 2020. So I will give the stage to you, Ted. So if you unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Shall I begin? Okay. Yeah, tonight I do want to share some insights into the significance and the representation in our consciousness that Libra should have, rather than try and produce an exhaustive list of how you might locate the importance of Libra in your own chart, and therefore how important a Libra full moon would be. It is worth mentioning to start with that all of these full moons will have differing effects on each of us, dependent on what is in the grid of our natal chart. For example, if we have 5 planets in Libra, maybe including the sun, born between September and October in a particular year, esoteric astrology holds that we need to develop those qualities of Libra to a higher extent. Now, to take my own example, I have Libra in a cross, in a cardinal cross square to the 3 of the cardinal signs, which means that there will be times when decisions have to be made. This is part of the very significant idea of what Libra is about as we tread the path. But I'd like to start with the seed thought, which Lucis Trust provide us with as well if we need to be reminded, which helps me. I choose the way which leads between the 2 great lines of force. And I was pondering on this a few years ago, and very clearly given the red, blue, green triangle. And it is clear to me, and sits in Bailey as well in the 7 Ray book, that these 2 great lines of force are those 2 which keep us in incarnation and form part of the rainbow bridge. The first ray of will and power, and it's that first ray energy which joins the monad to the physical body through the heart center or the sinus node of the heart, and it's called the life thread. The life thread. First ray energy, ray 1, life. We can all relate to that. And then, of course, the love thread is the second ray. And these are these great lines of force that the second thread passing from the soul to the cortex of the brain. We have nothing to do with those. They're set up for us in life. But we have to develop the mind so that we can start to reflect the energies of the first and second ray. And we do it through the ray predominantly of Libra, the 3rd ray of active intelligence, or the ray of mind. And so the way to see this is you've got will here and you've got love there. And these lines will converge eventually. But we in the middle, if we are working strongly with Libran energy, we have to, in one life or other, develop this Libran energy to the point where our minds are reflectors of those 2 other rays. So, of course, the mind can be pointed down here towards material and sensual matters, etc. And what is required is that the mind is turned to these 2 great energies of will or life force and love consciousness. And, of course, this is the illumination we talk about in the light of the soul. The mind can tip either way. And we can see that. And so if we have a lot of Libran energy to develop, because we've got these 4 or 5 planets in Libra, then the mind and the turning of the mind towards spiritual endeavor and an understanding, and more than an understanding, an expression of those two rays, then that's what the life will be about. And with meditation, the motive is love. That's a motive. That's really deep, that is. The motive is love. But the mind has to be used in those visualizations that Teresa most beautifully gives us, and Finian and Sally and anybody else who is in charge of a meditation session. There is a directing of the mind towards something much higher, and that higher comes in meditation of the type we have tonight, particularly through love, but also through the purpose and the will of God, which is, of course, all these rays are attested to in the Great Invocation. And this is by no means a casual correspondence. For me, it's a very deep correspondence, that these three are the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit in the Christian Trinity. Very important, because it's been given to me and plonked in front of me only recently as to how important this particular correspondence is. And so we understand the Father, the will of God, sending out into his world of the Old Testament, sending out into the world his Son, and his Son showing through the way of complete selfless love in the life of Christ, the beautiful application of the second ray of love, wisdom. And the Holy Spirit, said to guide the hand of those that wrote the scriptures, is giving us something for our mind. And that's so important as well. And so if we're working in this way, we're working in the highest way we can. We're working with the Trinity. And yes, there are the subsidiary rays. According to Alice Bailey, 85% of the ray of Libra is the ray of active intelligence. So let's just have a look a little bit more, bring it down from this great Trinity, and how it would affect us in our lives. One of the things that Libra is an air sign, and the air signs are very important in developing mentality for the reasons that I've given, but also for calming the emotional body, which can get very, very fraught. And, you know, the emotions are water, completely different element from the element of air and mentality, which Libra shares with both Gemini and Aquarius. And so in the first instance, Libra wants us to balance our emotions and bringing in the third ray, that word emotional, that phrase I should say, emotional intelligence, we can see exactly we've got to take this raw, untamed amygdala that many of us had at some stage and actually add some cortical influence of the mental body to it so that we can get a kind of a balanced response to an emotional reaction, and we don't just react emotionally, and the mind comes in more and more. And that's important, because without that balancing of the emotional impulse into something a little bit more intelligent, we can't really be able to express discernment and be able to be dispassionate about things, which is required at a mental level in certain particular instances. We get a diagnosis in the hospital that we don't want. We've got a choice in which the way we react to it. And notice in this seed thought, I choose. And look at the choices that we do have in the way that we can react to things. I choose the way. We choose the way we're going to react to things. And that's why this Libra is so important. And it is exhorting us to get more involved in the element of air than with the element of water. And it can still, even then, have its downfalls. If we look at the pitfalls, the sign of Libra, that's also the sign of a cul-de-sac. We can go so far along a path and come in and find, oh my, this is the wrong thing for me. And it's happened to all of us in certain ways. And it means that our thinking needs even more fine-tuning. We thought we can get mentally excited by something and go rushing down that path, and it might still be of value to have gone rushing down that path, with a degree of emotion perhaps, and find it isn't for us as well. And so we need to be careful that our minds are relatively clear of emotional clutter, particularly if that emotional clutter is to do with us and the way we like to be. Sometimes we don't like to be taken out of our comfort zone. Sometimes we want to stay with what we're used to, and the expansion of the mind is not what we want, but it might be what the soul wants. And I get a lot of opportunity to talk to people about how they're going to expand their minds. Sometimes they go into the caring situation, which is Cancer, but it's the most disciplined of the water signs, because while you're caring about other people, you can't be so concerned with yourself. And that is a discipline of the emotions which would come and work with the sign of Libra later on. Now, the idea that we can sit on the fence in Libra is certainly true to an extent. We are allowed to sit on the fence while we ponder extremes. And let me give you one example of extremes that often are practical in people's lives and relate to the two opposites which Libra is meant to balance. And we could see a lot of it at the moment with the COVID situation that we're surrounded by. There's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law. Now, the law is a good old Libran thing that we will probably all recognize anyway. But the letter of the law is that you will not travel outside Flintshire and go into Denbighshire in the next 2 weeks. But there may be reasons why you may need to. And one is the letter of the law and the other is the spirit of the law. And Libra asks you perhaps to sit on the fence while you weigh up the options of doing this, and probably in good Libran fashion agree that we need a bit of the letter of the law at times and a bit of the spiritual, and we have to weigh it up. And this is the kind of thing that Teresa was perhaps talking about, where we have a very, very grey situation with euthanasia, and we have to weigh up and take a view. But we have to take a view in the end with Libra. There is a requirement for choice, but there is also a requirement to weigh these things up in the mind before choosing. I know many Libra rising people, including my better half, who will say, no, it's all right, you make the decision. No, you've got to make the decision. At some point when we're on the path, we have to make that decision. But it's a good way to be. And it means that we can compromise. If we got true Libran ability with us, we can compromise. We can say, on the one hand, I see your point, and on the other hand, and maybe that's very, very important in relationships, because that's a huge word in Libra. It's relating. How do we relate? It's, sometimes we can have a partnership. It can be personal. It can be at work. And we need to be able to see it from the other person's point of view. And that brings in Libra again and weighing up. And the ability to compromise is to say, okay, I'll meet you halfway. I'll go halfway towards what this aim is that you want, but you don't surrender. That might be Pisces, but you don't surrender with Libra. You go halfway. I said to some lady, I said, how good are you? She had 5 plants in Libra. How good are you at compromise? I said, your husband looks a bit afflicted. Oh, yeah, she said, oh, I terribly. I said, can you compromise with your husband? She said, only if he's right. So this idea of relating means that we may have to give up some of our precious mental thought so that we can see that somebody else has a chance to. And we know this happens all the time. It happened in a conversation that Teresa and I had this morning over a particular matter, where we can see the other point of view and say, I can meet that. I can go with that. That's the spirit of Libra. That is what, and it's about cooperation. And that's so important if we're going to have the group scenarios, the collectives of the Aquarian age. We're going to need to be able to cooperate with a greater cause, an impersonal cause. And once we move away from water and we get towards air and fire, and I would say that the heart is ruled by Leo. We talk about the heart being on fire. if we're really going to fan the flames of that fire, we're going to need the element of air. We're going to need the help of Libra, not the help of a water sign that might put the fire out. And this is part of the going up to the higher vibrations. And so Libra being the middle sign, if you like, and the middle way of the Buddhist, and the middle path between the two extremes, it is kind of acting for us as a bit of a fulcrum in moving from our perhaps overly emotional human nature to something which is going to be able to act effectively as a spirit and deal with the element of fire. I would like to think we can have some discussion on this. I'll make a couple more points, but I think a lot of people will have a lot of feeling about Libra. It's one of those signs, because it's involved in relationships, because it's involved in cooperation and compromise. People do have a lot of views on these things. And I would like maybe a small group, but for people to perhaps talk about that. I would say in conclusion to Libra, I got a wonderful phrase from an astrology book. Libra represents the completed point of view or inclusive understanding. In other words, it's been able to bring together and in some way coherently put them together to say, I can see the complete picture now. I can see this, and it's called the completed point of view or inclusive understanding. And I do quite like that. I think the other thing is alluding to something that was said here as an extract from tonight's talk, which I'm probably giving as we speak now. With each new attainment in consciousness, the Lucis Trust is saying, we are called upon to deal with increasingly more subtle nuances of glamour. This idea, and I'm sure people like Finian and Teresa and myself who've been confronted with the glamour of teaching, this path is a razor edge path. And we really have to be very careful that we don't get swept up by something on either side of the path that we've chosen for ourselves. You know, at the higher levels, it is the part of this trinity that I say about these lines of force. But at the lower levels, there can be things, you know, and Gary would tell me about this. I'm reminded in Greek myth, I think it's Jason, he's trying to go through between a whirlpool, Charybdis I think it's called, and the sirens here, and he has to steer this line because the sirens are singing and tempting and the whirlpool will drag him down. Scylla it might be, Scylla and Charybdis, and he's got to steer this line right the way through with the ship in order not to overcome to one nasty and one seemingly beautiful. And that can be the glamour that's talked about there. We have to be so sharp in our discernment, and maybe that discernment is to do with people who come into our lives and want to take energy out of it. We have to be discerning and say, how much energy can we give in those particular situations? So probably I think I've talked enough. Oh no, sorry, there's one more point I'd like to make. The law of karma. We often can get quite hurt, wounded by karmic things, effects that happen in this life where the causes are in previous lives. If we can see karma as a harmonizing effect, here's something that we've done and it's really knocked the balance out. This is the Libra thing. The Lords of Karma will say the only way to get that back into balance is for this to happen in this life. And if we can see something difficult and something which is afflicting us as being something which has reset the balance, and from now on we're going to have harmony, then we should be able to bear perhaps with a little more fortitude. I'm not saying we don't, but we say to people, you know, you've balanced it, you've resolved it now, but you had to do that. And it's hard not seeing the cause in this lifetime as well, very rarely seeing the cause in this lifetime, but the cause is there. And so I've made a note here, Always look at karma as a harmonizing effect, something under the Lepika lords, the lords of karma, which one of which is Saturn and Capricorn, but the others of which are to do more with Libra, and that it's meant to be a situation which will give us that peace. Libra does rule peace, it rules peacemakers, and I would say, going back to the Trinity, it probably rules that peace that passeth all understanding. So it's not like understanding is the end of the journey. And Finian will correct me if I'm wrong. It may only be the second Sephiroth down. It's certainly not Ketha. So, you know, we have to go through the stage of understanding in order to pass something greater, which is beyond understanding. But Libra will help us if we fully commit ourselves to the energies of this full moon to give that completed point of view or inclusive understanding as a stage on the path. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Lots to think about there, Ted. So I'm sure we'll have some questions and some good discussion after the meditation. Right, we'll come into the part of our evening where we join in a group meditation. So I'm going to ask you for now just to forget about everything that was said and get yourself comfortable. You want to be reasonably upright so that your chakras, your energy centers are aligned vertically. And also this brings you into this vertical alignment between the spirit and matter, between your highest aspect and your more physical aspect, so that you can bring those spiritual energies down into the meditation. So we don't need to be rigid, but comfortably relaxed and upright. And I want to come together as a group, and we come together simply by having the intention in our heart. This is where we come together as a group. And the affirmation of love is one way to do that. So if you just repeat it to yourself as I repeat the words. In the center of all love, I stand. From that center, I, the soul, will outward move. From that center, I, the one who serves, will work. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group, and throughout the world. And now just gently come into an awareness of your physical body. And I want to ground our energy to begin with. So I want you to imagine that you are sending energy either through your feet or through the base chakra, through the base of your spine, right down into the earth under the building in which you are. So just make that connection. And now gently close your eyes and we'll come into this present moment. And I want you to become aware of your body sitting on the chair. Become aware of the feel of the clothes on your skin. Now take your awareness to your sense of hearing and just allow the sounds of this moment to come in. And now take that awareness to your breath. And just watching the breath as it comes into your body. Watching the breath as it leaves. And just keeping a gentle focus on the breath. Just imagine with each breath you breathe a little deeper, allowing your physical body to relax and opening a channel right down through the very center of your body. Now keep this focus on the breath. And when your mind becomes distracted by thoughts or physical feelings or sounds, as soon as you realize, just come back to the breath. And come back without judgment or criticism. Come back with loving kindness. Keeping this focus on the breath, let it take you deep into that point of peace within you. That point of balance or equilibrium that is at the very center of your being. Giving you the capacity to step back from your thoughts and simply observe them. So they are like movements passing through your mind. And now bring your focus to the center of your chest. And I want you to breathe into your heart center. Just imagine a feeling of opening. If it helps, you can imagine a flower bud slowly opening. A feeling of expansion. And as it opens, your heart fills with love, with light, and through your heart you can connect to your higher self or your soul through this point of peace. Now I want you to bring white or violet, purple or gold light down from your higher self, and imagine it is coming in through the crown of your head, and it is flowing down through the major energy centers or chakras vertically associated with your spine, bringing them into perfect alignment and interplay. Imagine your heart as the vessel to receive and distribute this light throughout your body. So we bring the mind, the body, and the heart into alignment. Imagine your whole physical body is filling with this purifying, cleansing, healing light. Every cell in your body, strengthening your physical vehicle, strengthening your immune system, bringing calm and peace to the emotional nature, and the light of understanding to your mind. As you continue to fill your physical body with light, let it flow out into the energy field or the aura, the etheric body that surrounds the physical and interpenetrates at the chakras. So that all is light and all is love. Now imagine this lighted love flowing out into your home, to all the living beings in your home, plant, animal, people. And now imagine it flowing out into your neighborhood, your street. Let your heart be the vessel of distribution of this lighted love. Continue to let it flow out into your community. Until it fills the town or the city in which you live. Now allow this energy to connect with all the members of this group meditation, so that together this light encompasses our whole nation. Now imagine it flows out into this part of the world. It flows out to fill this hemisphere of our planet. And then to fill the southern hemisphere, so that our whole planet is encompassed by this light, this love. Imagine that we join with all groups who work with meditation in this way. With all light workers. Now envisage our planet from space and see our beautiful planet surrounded by this light. See the light flowing down into her, healing and restoring the balance in nature. So that our air and our waters are pure and clear. We have a healthy ozone layer. And our planet is healed. See all the animal and plant life flourishing. And see this light, this love flowing into the hearts and minds of all men, all of mankind. Bringing peace, goodwill, right relations within each individual, right relations within families, with loved ones, within communities, within nations, between nations, and throughout the whole human family. Bringing this balance so that each individual, from a point of peace, invokes world peace. Lifting our awareness and the collective consciousness so that we can learn to live in peace and in harmony with all. Visualize these energies unifying and eliminating all divisions within humanity, healing and transforming human consciousness, and establishing right human relations. Now continue to hold a space in your heart for this light and love, and let it radiate out, joining your individual will with the will of all who work in this way. Now I invite you to repeat the Great Invocation together, either silently or out loud. Repeat it with conviction and determination, pausing between each stanza to imagine the words being played out, and sealing the energy with the repetition of 3 Oms at the end. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. And now gently draw your energy back into your own energy field. And slowly come back to an awareness of your body. Just starting to move and stretch and opening your eyes when you are ready. Namaste. Right, now we have the opportunity to ask Ted some more questions, maybe to input into your insights into Libra and the full moon, or even just the aspects of Libra that are going on in the world, that are being challenged in the world at the moment. So just raise your hand if you would like to speak, and I will ask you to unmute. Oh, Finian, yes, please. If you can unmute, that would be it.
It's just an additional thing that you might be interested in to do with symbolism. The glyph for Libra was mentioned by Ted briefly as a sort of a cul-de-sac. The Esoteric Masonic Lodge that I was initiated into in London was called the Lodge of the Double Horizon. And one of the things they said was that glyph is ancient Egyptian. Because if you look, it's two parallel lines, but one of them bulges upwards. Mm. And they said the bottom line is the earthly horizon. The upper line is the spiritual horizon. And we actually have both. And Lord Horus in ancient Egyptian mythology was the lord of the two horizons. Mm-hmm. And it all fits in exactly with what you were saying, Ted, at the beginning about the two rays. Because, of course, they are also the two pillars of Solomon's temple. And it's the path of integration between those two is what everybody has to work out, which is Kabbalistic as well. It all sort of fits in. But I just thought I'd throw that one in, that, you know, Libra is the lord of the two horizons, which is also a form of balance, balancing the material and the spiritual.
Wonderful. Thank you. Ted, I wanted to ask a question pertinent to what's going on at the moment in the world. And I think it's becoming increasingly difficult for people to use their discernment to ascertain truth. We've got a lot of false news and false information. We have a lot of conspiracy theories. We have a lot of polar opposites in thinking. And also we have directive in terms of law from a government or a local level. And then we have our own directive from a higher law, or more, if you like. And I think part of what is really troubling people at the moment is trying to find their alignment, trying to keep their alignment with all these poles of opposites being pulled in one direction and then being pulled in another direction, and really struggling with finding truth. So can you talk a little bit about Libra and a higher truth and the discernment of truth, holding that place between these warring opposites?
Yeah, and then I'd like to come back briefly to Finian as well, because I was muted at the time, so I couldn't come back. But yeah, if we look for an understanding of what's going on at the moment, and we understand that this karmic planetary influence of Saturn now moving back towards Pluto, which is the destroyer of circumstances which are not spiritually enough for us at the moment, it does create chaos. Now, when I did the talk about COVID, I mentioned there may be a period between August and October when things could get difficult again. This is because Saturn's going retrograde and it's coming back towards Pluto, but it will stop in the middle of October and move away. And my view is that then, I know it's the winter season, I know what the scientists are saying as well, I'm saying it's going to alleviate somewhat, because I do believe that it's that energy that's bringing it in. But Pluto is here in Capricorn with Saturn back now in Capricorn, square to Libra. So we've got an affliction between being able to see, and I will talk about the higher truth in a moment, this purer mental vision, because Capricorn is an earth sign, and when it's afflicted, all kind of influences, material and terrestrial type of influences, are going to appear as obstacles. That's the affliction, and that's what we're seeing across the world, and the breaking up of law and order in some countries worse than in others, etc. And we even had that in France anyway before before COVID. There is a period of unsettling and very, very difficult for Libra being afflicted, for people to get discernment. I think my advice to people is, we've got to weather this storm. We're not necessarily going to get the truth of the matter until the rubble that's being caused by this explosion of Pluto and Saturn has been allowed, the dust has been allowed to settle. And we actually can then see that what has finally been destroyed is giving us space for other things. And so my advice is, and to myself, is don't look for the answers now. We've got to go through and you know, the wisdom states it will be 2023, 2024 before this is clearly out of the way, maybe giving the planet another 3 years. But we've got to have an end to the misinformation that's going on in whichever media that comes through. And so things have got to be brought to a climax, brought to a head, so that we can deal with this matter once and for all. Otherwise, how can the age of Aquarius be ushered in? So I think we have to just put our search for the truth a little bit on the back burner, although for certain people, lots of individual truths about their lives, about their country, about their politicians or whatever will come to them. But I think for the real bigger picture, we've got to wait for the dust to settle. And also, I think the other encouraging factor is that people are not putting their faith in the kind of things that perhaps they were putting their faith in. Well, every Friday night we go out and have a few bevies, and every Saturday we go to the match, or we do this or we do that. It's kind of where we were perhaps a little bit grossly involved with the material world. These things are going to be made more difficult in the future, and that's because we're being taught a lesson. Not just the resolution of the karma always opens up new opportunities, always opens up. And we know that we grow through difficult periods. Look how the country grew through the world wars, you know, because people just were confronted with something, and it drags out that spiritual staying power. But Libra does have the opportunity to get us to a midpoint. And I think with your meditations, when you say, and even with the invocation from the point of light, from the center, which we're trying to re-centralize and regroup and allow the outer just to disappear. Libra is that point in the center. And what I want to say to Finian was, you always seem to bring something helpful to the table, Finian. Thank you very much for that. Horus, you know, in esoteric astrology, time is ruled by, mentioned Horus there, time is ruled, the tick of the clock time, long time dragged out is Saturn, but live and Capricorn. But we've got here the idea of a movement towards something spiritual. And also, I think if you look at the glyph of Libra, we can see that as Akhenaten's sun rising over the valley, when he got rid of the pantheon of Egyptian gods, goddesses, animals, etc. He said there is one God, monotheism, it lies behind the disk of the sun. And he set up, with Nefertiti, he set up his civilization, as I understand it, on the banks of the Nile so that they could see the rising sun. And if you think of the glyphs, there's the horizon and there's the rising sun coming up, a wonderful expression for the soul's purpose Libra people, of actually visualizing that sun rising every morning and fulfilling that glyph which was added to by.
And it's very interesting that first thing in the morning and last thing at night, so as the sun rises and as the sun sets, is a period of time in yoga philosophy that they call sattva. So it's when the rajasic, which is the very movement, fiery, busy energy, like is balanced with the tamasic, which is very heavy, can't move. When you get these two at the base of the triangle, the point of balance is sattva, which is a point of profound bliss and peace that you find at sunrise and sunset. And the idea is that is why it is so profound to meditate at sunrise and sunset, because the whole earth, the whole of our energy is in sattva, this point of peace, this point of balance.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting, leading exactly on from what you say there about this point of peace, and the peace of God that passeth all understanding, has a link with Shambhala. Shambhala is said to be the point, the ultimate point of peace, where everything eventually stands still. And therefore there must be, I haven't worked it out exactly, a very strong connection between Libra and Shambhala. And you wouldn't necessarily think it, because people can think of the fire of Shambhala and the will of God and these very, very strong first ray energies. And then you think of the beautiful harmonious energy. But there is something there. And maybe it is like the link of head and heart.
But it's opposite Aries too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's opposite Aries. And all these things need to be blended. Ultimately, the zodiac needs to all come together. So I do think, I do always feel very energized at the Libra and full moon time. And particularly because it's part of the cross in my chart, which is challenging. And the square to Libra as well. And we get challenged sometimes in the most unusual ways that we would think we may be doing fairly well with this or fairly well with that, and then something gets thrown in, you know. I think Finian calls them like a curved ball. They just get, and they, oh wait a minute, I thought I was doing okay with that, and then it's, and you know, that's that's growth in a way, but we don't always, it's not always easy for us. So no, I do say to people, just be patient.
And also on that concept of the cross, you know, if we're in a vertical alignment, spirit and matter, and then what's going out in the world, if that is the horizontal arm of the cross, well, the point of peace between the two in the heart is that point of patience, of poise, of perseverance, of what you call spiritual staying power is found right here.
But I also think that we can maybe find that for ourselves to a way, but we'll never feel completely at peace while our fellow brothers are warring, whether it be in the US presidential election, whether it be the politicians and the scientists over here, whether it be the Middle East crisis, which still isn't really resolved, and whether it be what China's real motives are. We're still caught up, because we're one humanity, we're still caught up with those other areas. And so none of us can really feel easy about things if we are truly linked up, which we know we are. If we're consciously linked up, we're thinking about these other areas and we're looking, and there doesn't seem to be much light at the moment. There doesn't.
No.
And I can pretend that there is, because I can feel it as well.
Yeah, and I think that's, I've had a lot of people say to me, they just feel an energy that is unsettling.
Yes.
And I think that is, even if you are a point of peace in your own life and existence, you will be affected by all that is out of balance. And it's interesting, I read recently that, of course, this is exactly the story of the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna is asked to get into the battle and hold that point of peace, and you know, the directive was, if you want to negotiate these times, read the Bhagavad Gita. And I must admit that I quite often intuitively read it. I'll just let it open to whatever page. And I don't read it with my lower mind. I let the lyrical, poetic just infiltrate an understanding beyond words. And there's things like that, poetry, things, Libra rules these kind of deeper beauties, these energies that can come in and help us to find that point of peace and to soothe our soul amidst all that's going on.
Yes. Yeah. I just like to say, this is the email that is the Arcane Schools October letter, and it goes straight into the principle of conflict, you know, and it's I'll email it on to you, because you may not get this, is because I've been a student of it in the past before, talking about identity politics as opposed to ideology. I've only had a quick skim of it, but they're very relevant, these letters, in applying the wisdom, I think, to what's going on. And some of your group and friends might be interested to see that as well, you know, but it literally comes on the 1st of each month by email nowadays. It's 2 pages, but it's worth having, and maybe you could let the people with this recording have this. I'll send it on tonight. Yeah.
Lovely. Now, are there any other comments or questions? Oh, Finian.
No, Mike?
No, he's quiet tonight.
It's just interesting the way it goes, again, the Kabbalistic thing. But we're just coming to the end of the Jewish high holidays, because the new moon in Libra is the one that starts the new year. And then 10 days in, it was Monday, they have Yom Kippur. It all fits in with this same moon. The high holidays or days of awe. And that's just interesting. Because the other months in the Hebrew year don't start with the new moon, but the new year does, and it's always this one.
Yeah, lovely.
That's interesting.
It is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think I'll leave that there, and I'd just like to say thank you very much for those who joined us live and for those who are joining us in the recording. Next week, we continue with the series of talks on the chakras, and we'll be talking about the throat Visuddhi, which is very interesting because Visuddhi rules truth and truthful communication. So very relevant. So have a lovely evening and namaste. Thank you.